Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, PBM, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Marks Paneth, Capital One Bank. Additional funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Amerant Bank, Bank of America, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Kesmatidis Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, People's United Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, and these friends. Manchester, England, New York City, a life of a variety of interesting careers, characteristics, and a very interesting individual. I'm fortunate to have the founder and president of Daintree Advisors, Alison Gross. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael. I am thrilled to be here and thrilled to be living in New York. And yes, having made that massive move and never looked back.
So let's go back and let's talk about when the family originally went to Manchester. Let's start on your mother's side, and then let's go to your father's side.
Yes, we came to England very early on. The first record of the family arriving in England was all the way back in the 1850s, where my mother's family had come from Poland. We know that they got as far as Plymouth on the south coast of England because one of my ancestors was the rabbi of the Plymouth synagogue. He then moved up north. We're not exactly sure why, but he got another job, and he was a cantor in a synagogue in Sheffield, up in the north of England, and that's how the family ended up in Manchester. That was my mother's side. My mother's father's side were already in Manchester in the 1880s. We understand they came from Poland. And my great-great-grandmother and grandfather met in kindergarten in Manchester.
So let's talk a little bit about your mother's side. I mean, there are some interesting things with the cars, with the television license, some articles. You know, we have so many interesting things. Why don't we profile a little bit before you coming to New York to get to work for Macy's, and you know, and the, as you would say, the schmatta business, because the family was in the schmatta business.
The family was, yes. I mean, the north of England was known for the Industrial Revolution, and on the Lancashire side of the Pennines, it was cotton industry, and on the Yorkshire side of the Pennines, it was wool industry. And my ancestors who went up there got into jobs that were related to that. My grandfather, whose name was Arthur Jonathan Royce, was originally Rosenthal. And when World War I broke out, there was certainly feeling against anyone who had a German-sounding name. And most of the family members changed their names at that time. So the family name of Rosenthal, half of them became Royce, because Rolls-Royce, what can get more English than that? They pinched the name. And the other half of the family became Rose. This was quite a normal thing that was happening in England at the time. My grandfather was in the early 1920s, was working in the early, let's call it the electronics industry. He worked for a couple of different companies, and we actually have in our possession a license to experiment in television, dated 1928. Clearly, they were a little bit ahead of their time, and there wasn't much money to be made in it at that time. And I guess he was a fabulous salesman, because he shifted gears, and he went to work for leather goods companies and was a traveling salesman. In fact, he was one of the first people in England to own a car, traveled around the north of England. In those days, you didn't need a driver's license. He tells wonderful stories of having just driven out of the lot and off onto the street without so much as a road test. So that was what he did. That's my mother's father. My mother met my dad in Manchester at a local social club. And my dad's business, which was great fun for us growing up, was he supplied engine parts for antique pre-World War II English motor cars, specifically Morrises and Austins. So growing up, my dad's customers would sometimes, pull up outside the house, and there'd be these incredible automobiles. And to this day, I have a great love of antique cars from, pre-computers, where somebody could actually, open the bonnet, as we say in England, and get under the hood and work on it themselves. So I've got some lovely pictures of myself, one with a Model T Ford that we owned when I was just about able to stand, so I guess between 1 and 2 years old, and then a Morris Minor that we owned later, and a whole bunch of other cars. My parents got married in 56. And at that time, my father was driving a 1923 Rolls Royce, and he had to sell it to get married because he didn't have the money. I told him he should have kept the car and lived in sin.
Let's talk about the other grandparents, the other side.
Yeah, my father's family arrived a little bit later, arrived in the 1890s from Poland, arrived in Manchester. My great-great-grandfather was a peddler. He saw a gap in the market, and he saw that builders merchants were supplying the outer villages and the places around Manchester with all sorts of things, but nobody was supplying them with glass. And window panes in those days were very small, lots of multi-paned windows, as you can imagine. And so what he figured out was, here's a great gap in the market. He put window panes on a horse and cart, and off he went into the villages. And over time, he added more things to his supplies, and his customers were getting bigger and stronger further into Derbyshire and outside of Manchester. So he must have decided, okay, I need a little warehouse, I need somewhere to put stuff. Eventually, this developed into a full-on builder's yard. The family name is Markowitz, and the Markowitz builder's yard started in Derbyshire during World War I. They're still running to this day. The family name of Markowitz, unfortunately, has died out as the family name, because only the daughters survived. But to this day, my cousins and the great-great-grandchildren of those pioneers with the horse and cart are now running Markowitz Builders Supplies, which is now with, I think, 10 different depots all over England.
So it's time to talk about you. You were born, what, 1956?
57, yep, in Manchester.
So tell me about growing up in Manchester, the Haboline, the organizations, the activists who you were, okay? Let's talk a little bit about that before, college, and then coming to America, as they would say.
Yes. I was brought up in a North Manchester suburb, And I went to a Jewish middle school and high school, King David. You may not know that in England, there's an interesting situation that there isn't a division of church and state in school. So there is school prayer. So in order to take care of the children who might not want to go to a Christian school, the British government opens schools for other religions. So that was how I was at a state public school, but it's still running today, a Jewish school. During my growing up years, I suppose I was a nonconformist. I wanted to be different, and joined something called Habonim, which in this country I think was named Habonim Dror, a youth movement, Zionist, socialist youth movement, where many of my friends at the time did make Aliyah. They are in Israel today, and we are still in touch. However, for me, it was really an eye-opener. It got me away from the school. I mean, you can imagine, you look at the way I look now, glasses and curly hair. Think back to the 60s in England with Mary Quant. Or Vidal Sassoon and Twiggy, and the way that girls were supposed to look. I didn't look that way. This was a way for me to say, okay, I'm creative. I can do different things. I'm not going to try and straighten my hair and conform to that Twiggy look. Difficult for a teenager, yeah, absolutely, I'll own it. But it was really enlightening for me and my musical taste and my art taste. I then went on to art school. I did my A-levels at a place called Bolton School of Art, which was, when we go back to talking about the Industrial Revolution and the cotton industry, Bolton was one of the heart of the area of the cotton industry. So my studies focused around textile design. And I was then at Manchester Polytechnic University, which is now part of UMIST. And I studied textile design, design history, art history, and curiously, of course, history of the Jews of Manchester, which was sponsored by the King David High School that I belonged to, and was part of my my exams.
So let's talk about, you came to America not knowing anybody to speak of, and you'd never been here, correct?
I had been a couple of times on business. So I graduated from Manchester University with a degree in textile design and went into the fashion industry. And part of it, I worked for an importer, supplying the sort of boutique window chains on most of the high streets throughout the towns of England. And one of the great parts of my job was what the industry calls comparison shopping. So I was sent to New York a few times a year to see what was selling in the stores, see what was on the street, see what was happening. I did that in other cities as well. It was a tough life. So I had been to New York, but my perception of what New York was like came from movies.
But wasn't there a company who really wanted you to work in New York when you came here? You had an opportunity.
I had a job, yeah. I don't think I'm the kind of person who would have just got on a plane and shown up. I needed a little tad more security than that. So in traveling, and I'd been buying knitwear for this British company and buying all through Asia. And I'd met many people in the factories, you know, everyone's doing the same circuits and using the same places. And I had met a company who were importers into the United States, but they were in the coat business. And they wanted to get into sportswear. So they hired me to break them into the sportswear market, which was really interesting because it wasn't really my forte. I was, as I say, I was a knitwear specialist, but they owned spaces in factories that were doing things with leather and suede. And so they hired me, and I created these sportswear lines for them, moved to New York in January of 1981. And within that first 6 months, opened their sportswear lines with major department stores in the US.
How'd you end up at Macy's?
Switch to the other side of the desk as the person who was schlepping the bag with the samples and selling. I reached a point where I needed to move on, and I needed to get bigger. And I was hired by Macy's to be the knitwear buyer for Clubhouse for the whole of the United States.
And what happens after Macy's?
After Macy's, there's a big shift. And the big shift is I'm married, and I have my first child, and I'm on maternity leave and interviewing nannies, and realizing that I'd reached this massive decision in my life that I didn't want my child and future children to be brought up by nannies. And many of my friends did that, many of people in the fashion industry, because I was away, don't forget, half the year. I was traveling 6 months out of 12, and some of my trips were long trips. I mean, I was in Asia once for 10 weeks. I mean, you'd want to shoot yourself for a hamburger. So it was a decision that I made, and I talked to the people at Macy's and decided not to go back. And then it's a case of, okay, what do I do now? And I walked into my local JCC where we were living.
Now, how did you end up in Staten Island? I mean, if you want to talk about Manchester, Manhattan, how was Staten Island?
Yes, a detour on the road. So Staten Island was different. How did I get there? Because my husband at the time was living and working in Staten Island. So that was where we were. It's very different from where I grew up. And yet, in some ways, it's very similar in that it has a very strong sense of community. All the communities of Staten Island, whether you're talking about the Italian American community, the Jewish American community, it's very, very community minded. And the JCC in Staten Island was absolutely fantastic. I walked in not knowing anybody and said, okay, got this 2-month-old child, give me something to do. And we talked about it, and they said, well, the first thing that we've got going on is we've got a charity fashion show. Would you like to run it for us? Perfect segue. And I went from running that fashion show to running all sorts of fundraising events for them. They invited me to sit on their board. And then a little while later, they said, no, actually, we don't want you on the board. We'd like to give you a full-time job. And I became the director of development. And from that, I got involved in national organizations, JCCA, which is the association of JCCs across the whole country. And I was then asked if I could be borrowed by a JCC in New Jersey to run the JCC Maccabee Games. So the Maccabee Games every 4 years is in Israel, but on the intermediate years, it takes place within the United States. So the state of New Jersey had bid on it, but they didn't have a games director. So they borrowed me, hired me. At that point, we had left Staten Island and I was living in Essex County, New Jersey. And I became the games director, which was, to give you a concept of what that was like, that was 18 months of my life to plan a 5-day event. So that 5 days is 2,500 athletes, 6,000 volunteers. The athletes all have to be fed. The volunteers all have to be fed. We had 18 different sports spread in different campuses throughout Essex and Morris counties. We took all the kids, we bought out the Circle Line one night, and we took all the kids down to Weehawken and put them on the Circle Line and showed them Manhattan from the water. We did opening ceremonies at the Meadowlands Arena. and I did the seating plan. You should have seen that on the floor with massive charts, trying to pace it out before we uploaded it and put it online. I mean, absolutely hilarious. So yeah, that was my sort of the biggest global thing that I'd done to date at that point. And then after the games was over, sort of looking around, okay, well, what do I do next? And one of my volunteers, as I mentioned, we 6,000 volunteers. One of my volunteers at the games was one of 6 managing partners at an investment bank in Manhattan. And he basically said to me, if you can deal with this, you can do my conferences, come and work for us and run our institutional investor conferences.
This is Firm and Sells, correct?
This was Firm and Sells. So yes, I am very proud of the fact that I worked for Roy Furman and Bernard Sells and had the most wonderful time. Investment bank that specialized in the media and entertainment industry. And I ran their conferences, and every time they got bigger and they acquired another industry group, the industry group would come to me and say, we need a conference.
So what happens after Firm and Sells?
Well, there's a great deal of consolidation in the financial services industry, as you well know. And Firm and Sells became ING Barings when ING bought Baring Brothers. And they were based in Europe and of course out of Amsterdam and in London, but they didn't have a foothold in the United States, and they wanted to open up business here. So simply from my perspective, they reprinted my business card and I continued to do what I was doing, but we were ING Barings. And then 3 years later, the same thing happened again, and ING Barings for the United States was acquired by ABN AMRO. Interestingly, another Dutch bank reprinted my business card, and I kept doing what I was doing. It enlarged my repertoire and my experience. I got to travel to Europe. When I was at ABN AMRO, we sponsored the Volvo Round the World Ocean Sailing Race, and I was responsible for the American legs of the race. So everything that took place in the harbor of New York, Baltimore, and Annapolis, I ran everything for the race, for the logistics, for people watching, everything that was involved.
With like 5 minutes left, we have to go quickly to Willis, okay? I'd like to talk about your new business, and I'd like to talk about your son and daughter.
Thank you. Yeah, so in 2008, when so many things had changed in financial services industry, I was headhunted, very luckily, by someone from Willis in London. Willis is one of the largest global insurance brokers in the world, so I made the jump from investment banking to insurance, and had an incredible experience working for wonderful people. I was based here in New York. I got to take Willis to Davos, and we became members of the World Economic Forum, and I nurtured that relationship. And then 4 years ago, Willis merged with Towers Watson, professional services firm. So again, rebranding, doing all the things that I was doing in terms of conferences, and moving forward to today.
So during the pandemic, you start Daintree.
During the pandemic, it's a great time to start a new business, especially when you when you're an expert in events. But interestingly, I've been doing so many other things, and as I say, handling my relationship with the World Economic Forum. I'd been writing, I'd been promoting thought leadership, been working on such subjects as the Sustainable Development Goals with the United Nations, working on sustainable investing, and it just made perfect sense at this point in my life to go out on my own to say, all right, well, I've been doing this for Willis and for Willis Towers Watson. Now's the time that I should be opening up to be able to say, well, wait a minute, I can do this for other industries as well. So formed Daintree Advisory in the early part of this year. Of course, all the events. Yes, last year. Right. You're right. All the events are virtual. They still are. And that's not actually a bad thing. And I really think that going forward, we are going to have a complete change. There is no going back. It's going forward. There will be both. We'll be meeting in person. Son and daughter. Son is Zach. Yes, Zach, the reason that I shifted my career. So thank you, Zach. And Chelsea. Zach is married to Emily. They're in central New Jersey. And Zach works for the Board of Ed for a central New Jersey school district, and he runs their library system. He is their head librarian. My daughter, Chelsea, sort of followed her mother's footsteps. She lives in Philadelphia, and she does marketing and communications for an insurance broker on the Eastern Seaboard, and loving it, and handling all sorts of stuff with regards to writing and social media and websites, and doing a great job. I'm extremely proud of both of them.
And I'm very proud to have you today. I think it was a very interesting story, and only the best of luck in the new company. And it's 2021, and I'm certain it's going to grow. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. It's been a real pleasure.